Phil, where are you vacationing?
I'm in the Dominican Republic for the
Amazing.
second time in 3 months. Um, Casa de Campo, highly recommend it.
Amazing. I
So,
honeymooned in the Dominican, but have not been back.
yeah, it's a great place. We love it. As people sort of filter in here, we're going to give everyone a minute or so for Zoom to just let everybody into the webinar. Um, if you're in and want to share, I'd love to know where people are dialing in from. So feel free to put your city and state or country into the chat. Hey, Rachel, Raleigh. All right, awesome. Houston, Miami, Denver. NYC. This is
Whoa.
amazing.
Wow.
Hey, Sharon.
There's a few people in here.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone.
Hi,
Hey,
everyone.
everybody. It's
I'm in New
amazing.
Hampshire where we got some unexpected snow last night and it's a little messy
Oh,
here.
wow.
And Chicago is balmy today. We're like,
Is it?
yeah, in the 40s. So
It's gross here. It's like now
basically spring.
raining and no.
It's in the 70s in Atlanta, so I can't complain.
Oh, Alex.
Okay.
Oh.
Oh, York, Pennsylvania. That's where my wife's from. Hey, Caroline. 74 in Alabama. Awesome.
Wow.
Argentina. I bet it's warm there. Amazing.
And Ed is asking you, Ellis, did you connect with JD yet?
Yes, thank you. Hey, Ed. You bet. JD and I have time on the calendar.
Oh, we've got another Australia person. Nice.
A lot of Colorado, a lot of California, a lot of Florida.
Yeah.
Hey, Deb.
Hi, Deb.
Deb.
You're in New Hampshire.
Oh,
Amazing.
Karen.
Deb is your
That's
unofficial
Karen.
fangirl. Good to know.
There you go.
We love Deb.
We do love Deb.
We get to meet Deb in person in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
No, transform.
I know. I think Deb talked about making a t-shirt, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Which I kind of
yeah.
low key support, but I think her plan is solid.
Yeah, we'll all be at Transform, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
I might.
Phil, are you
as
going?
well. I may go. Well,
Nice.
TBD.
Nice.
Nice.
Yeah. Amazing. Well, thanks everybody for sharing in the chat where you're dialing in from. It's amazing to see familiar faces, new faces, people from all over the country and the world, actually, for that matter. If you are interested in starting a fractional practice of your own, if you're fractionally curious, or perhaps you already have a fractional practice and maybe you've got it and it's kind of working, maybe you've got it and it's going really well and you just want to learn how to continue to build your business, you're in the right place. We're going to be talking about kind of 101 aspects of setting up this sort of business, but I think a lot of the tips and tricks that we're going to share today are going to be broadly applicable to folks that already have their business up and running or looking to understand how to charge, how to get customers, how to build your brand, etc. I'll kick things off with a couple of introductions, also set some expectations for the rest of this session. So in terms of the expectation setting, so if you're on here and you're looking for SHRM credit, we've got you covered. You'll be eligible for that as well as HRCI credit. And we will also have a networking power hour in about 30 minutes where you can share your LinkedIn profile URL. This is one of the best parts of these webinars. You can connect with folks who are also fractionally curious. And we've had a lot of awesome connections made throughout these webinars, which we run on basically a bi-monthly basis at this point. So we love kind of sharing the expertise of amazing folks like we have on the phone today with our audience. And thank you very much, everyone, for being here. And one of the more fun aspects of these webinars is that we usually get a lot of great questions throughout these conversations. And so if you've got questions about something somebody's saying, please feel free to drop it in there. And yes, Melissa, thanks for sharing your LinkedIn profile. Please, everybody, hold off on doing that until the networking aspect, just so it's not distracting from what the panelists are saying. And we'll have an awesome opportunity for everybody to do that. So please share your insights as well in the chat. If you've got a different perspective or something that's unique that you think would be helpful for the rest of the folks on the phone, we always like to learn from the audience as well. I'll do a couple of quick introductions and then we will kind of jump into it. So if we haven't met yet, my name is Phil Strazula. I'm the founder of Select Software Reviews. We are a business that helps HR professionals find and buy the right software. So you're looking for an HRIS, an ATS, EOR, payroll, whatever the case may be. We can help you out. Around 100,000 companies a month use our research on our website. And then you can also connect one-on-one with one of our advisors to get bespoke advice for your organization, completely free, and comes with a 4.9 star rating from the HR professionals that we help out. With me on the phone is Tracy Spangenberg. Tracy, in addition to being an amazing person, is a fractional CPO, speaker, HR thought leader. She's a former chief people officer at the Granite Group and now an advisor and fractional HR executive with 25 years of executive HR leadership experience, focused on aligning people strategy with business strategy in industries with deskless employees. Ella Scani is the founder and fractional chief people officer. She's a solopreneur and 2 times founder. She provides fractional HR leadership, advisory, and consulting work to startups. And she's also the founder of the Fractional People Group, which I highly recommend checking out. Maybe we can drop a link in the chat for folks who are interested in fractional, who want to join that group. And it's just a great place for HRpreneurs to support and cheer each other on. Alex is a fractional CPO, speaker, and startup advisor, global people leader, entrepreneur, startup advisor, mental health, and DEI champion. Alex's specific expertise centers on creating, transforming, and building out systems that foster an equitable, innovative, and inclusive workplace culture. And of course, I was sort of reading a bit there off the script here, but I think in general, we just have 3 amazing people here who know a lot about getting a fractional business off the ground, scaling it, and not just working with companies as a CHRO, but also working in an advisory capacity. And so I'm super excited to learn from these folks, and I hope you are as well. Before we get into the content, I did want to kick off a short poll that will just help us kind of tailor the content. It's nice to know who we have here, and we'll kind of get a feel for that through the chat, the questions we're getting, the answers that we're getting. But let us know kind of where you're at in your fractional journey and what some of your biggest challenges are right now. And we're going to try to address this throughout the talk. With all of that in mind, I'd love to just sort of kick things off. And Tracy, if you wouldn't mind starting us off, I'd love to just get your advice and insights on somebody starting off in their fractional journey. What should they be thinking about?
We didn't talk about me not going first. This is my first. So it takes, as Alex knows well, it takes me like a minute or 2 to settle in, so I'm not like deer in the headlights. So advice on people just starting out. So here's I don't love to give advice, but I love to share stories and love to share experience, because I really wholeheartedly believe that, one person's fractional journey, one person's journey in everything is completely different than the others. So the advice I would give is talk to as many people as humanly possible, attend as many events like this as you can, and just gather as much data as you can and as much information as you can, so you can make your own, like we love to say in HR, right? Your own data informed decision on what may be the best path for you. So I think people attending here are absolutely taking the right first step in their fractional journey, if that's something that they're interested in, because that's probably the only advice I really give, is to talk to as many people as you can.
What about in terms of, somebody asked in the chat, the legality of things? Should you set up an LLC? Any advice on, you got your first customer, they owe you some money. Yeah. How do you
practical
get that money?
Yeah, there's a caveat to everything, right? So like I set up an LLC. So my husband was and is a fractional CFO and COO. So I had the ability to be like, hey Dave, how do I do this, right? So I set up an LLC right away because I wanted to set myself up as a business right away. And, I picked clients carefully, and I think one of the smart things I did was set the terms of my contract to bill at the beginning of the month and get paid by day 15. So it kind of splits the difference, right? And so every fractional person will tell you, yeah, you'll be chasing some, and certainly you will. But I think setting things up at the beginning isn't absolutely necessary, but it's super helpful.
I will like
Oh,
give my personal experience, which is like my first 3 clients were on my social security number and I just got to work. So it's not necessary
No.
to make, you can still make money without an LLC.
Yeah.
And then you like can set it up properly. And I don't think my tax guy likes me, but
And I will add to Ellis, I did the same thing. I didn't know how long I would even do this for. So I just did a few 1099s at the beginning. And I was like, well, if this continues, then maybe I'll create an LLC, which is what ended up happening. But I didn't know if it was just going to be a short-term thing and I would go back to an in-house role. So going back to Tracy's point, it's different for everyone. So you just got to evaluate what's personally right for you.
the lean startup method. Ellis, do you mind giving us a definition of fractional? Just because somebody asked that in the chat, and there probably are other folks out there that maybe just need sort of that foundation.
yeah, absolutely. Yes. Thanks for asking that too. It's really nice to anchor in definitions. So fractional is when you are part-time embedded inside of an organization. So if you think about the 2 terms of consulting or fractional, some of the key differentiators can look like with fractional, I have an email inside of my client's company. I'm in Slack. I manage someone inside of the company. I'm on the executive team. And so I'm very much part of the team, but I am just not full-time with the company. Versus consulting, which usually looks like you are an external resource for them that, you might be in meetings and things, but you usually have your own email, or you're not introduced to the entire company as part of the team. You're there as an expert in the consulting capacity or project capacity. Fractional also usually does not have an end date. Like interim, it is typically a full-time structured amount of time where there is a proactive end date, whether the end date is when the next person is hired or whether someone's coming back from leave or something like that. But fractional is this indefinite role embedded inside of the company, with embedded being the term I use the most, probably.
I love the nuanced answer from an expert who clearly is an expert. I think a lot of folks are probably wondering, how do I get my first clients? And probably people who are already kind of doing this, and maybe they got their first client from, there was their employer, referral or whatnot, are probably trying to figure out, how do I grow this business and how to get more clients? What advice would you all have?
So the first thing I would say, if it's okay, is is don't underestimate the power of talking to anyone about your business. And I'd say I ended up having very organic conversations with friends of mine that are CEOs of different companies, and they wanted to better understand what it meant. And all of a sudden they're like, well, we don't really have anyone that does HR and we could benefit from some of these things. So organic conversations can lead to potential fractional engagement. So that's kind of what happened for me initially. And so I was very lucky that the work kind of came to me by organic conversation, but also it doesn't always happen that way. I also I don't want to romanticize that everything, because you can have a bad year when nothing comes your way if you aren't getting out there and doing proper business development. So that's been my experience, at least.
Yeah, a lot of what we talk about inside of and I appreciate you, Phil, but I'm not going to call myself an expert. I just have talked to lots of people, and I'm a year and a half in. So I'm
Same.
like, my tagline is learning every day. So I'm constantly learning, which is one of the reasons I love it. But there's thousands of chats in fractional people from the last 18 months that I like to pull on. And I also went on that curiosity tour and talked to anyone and everyone to learn the adventure. But a lot of what we talked about with new business development, because it is the number one thing that people ask about, is that it is very much relationship-based marketing. And it is all about the trust transfer. So we are in a profession, let's use fractional HR leadership as the example, which is a very trust-based role. You are very quickly going into an organization and helping them with their most important line item and most important asset, which is their people. And so having the ability to be referred into clients is really the most powerful way and most effective way to get clients. And so it's that trust transfer, having enough people in your network who know what you're doing. To Alex's point, they know that you're open to this type of work. And then when they hear the need, they mention your name in the room when you're not there. And so from like a tactical marketing perspective, that looks like just creating relationships, checking in with the people you've worked with before, creating a list of people that you know really enjoyed working with you, and just like checking in with them with no objective other than to catch up and let them know what you're up to.
And I would just add,
Yeah.
sorry, you go.
No, go ahead.
No,
you go, Alex. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say too, it just made me think as Ellis was speaking, one of the clients I have is a CEO of a cybersecurity company, and I knew him as a friend for many years. And he, to Ellis's point, said also, feel free to share your service offerings with me, and I am comfortable sharing that with my clients. So it's also that if you do a good job with who you're working with, they will continue to help expand your network and your relationships as well.
Mm-hmm.
I 100% agree with that. And I wanted to share a quick story. And we'll talk about this probably later if we get to it, but I'm doing more advising now. So that's a little bit different. So I started in fractional and then took that and redefined what that meant for my industry, because I work largely in distribution. So my clients come from, or even the talks that I have come from two primary ways, not necessarily my network, but my network who knows somebody that needs what I do, right? So by me just being out there and sharing what I do and talking about that with people and sharing it on social media, that sparked, like, for example, a conversation with somebody who I went to college with, and I'm 52, so I'm gonna date myself. I went to college with, graduated 30 years ago, who's like, hey, I've started following you on social media and I have a client who could use what you do, right? And so that's a conversation, but that could lead to something. So that's just being out there and sharing what you do. The other thing is I speak quite a bit. And so the other way clients come is I hear you speak about HR in a way that is new to me or different, or my HR team doesn't do. So that's another way. So just by you talking about what you do or what you want to do, whether it's on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram or in like local circles, that will at least get you conversations.
And I think it's scary to start putting yourself out there, but it becomes less scary over time. A person that I listened to a few years ago called it basically creating friend nets. So if you start producing content that relates to some niche of the world, you're going to sort of net the people who are interested in that. And there might only be 50, 60 people that view a post, but they might be the right 50 or 60 people. And one of them could become a customer. The other thing that I'll say is I would never overestimate that people in your network know what you do. My brother-in-law last week literally was like, can you guys help us find the right EOR? I was like, yes, we can do that. And I've been like saying this on the internet for, 10 years or something like that. And we've had multiple conversations about it. And so it is all about, to Alex's point, like having those conversations over and over again and reinforcing, hey, this is what I do. Here's a case study. Here's a win. Here's a brand that I worked with, et cetera. I'm curious from y'all's perspective, you
Phil,
get that.
Phil, can I just add one more point? Because I saw a question in the chat that made me think of this too, is something we didn't touch on, is because I think people also worry, like, how do I go about getting that first client? Also, what if I'm not necessarily senior enough? And I think we need to also debunk that you can only get these types of roles at senior levels. They happen at different levels. And if you don't feel like you necessarily have the relationships or the networks, there are fractional people consulting firms out there who are hiring people to embed into their businesses too. So there are companies that do that. Now, they might not always have availability or things like that, but you don't necessarily need to go it alone as well.
Yeah.
And I think like just adding to the leadership, because there's a lot of different schools of thought in the fractional space, and as an industry it's kind of becoming a conversation and definition. And the way that I like to think about it, or how I've seen it, is really the focus is that you are an expert in what you do, or you have done it before, which makes you able to sell and quickly join a company in that expertise and create impact where someone who hasn't done it and is learning it for the first time is learning it. And so there are fractional learning and development leaders, fractional talent acquisition leaders, fractional recruiters. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be the level, but I would encourage you to have done it before. Meaning, like, if you are a manager in HR and you want to continue to progress in your career and become a director, doing a fractional director role is maybe not the right way to position that, because the benefit to companies of hiring fractional is that they do not have to train and develop us. Like that is something that they sign up for in that contract. So you don't want to do a role you've never done before and selling yourselves as a fractional expert in that. And so that's just an important distinction of, when you do go out and go fractional, or as you're looking for work to do, focus on what you're really good at and what you're an expert in and what you can do faster than someone who's learning it for the first time. And then you can sell confidently in that way into the organization.
That's a huge point. Huge point,
Yeah,
Alice.
It is.
I would also, if this is your first time kind of selling yourself, it can be somewhat daunting. And I think the other thing to keep in mind whenever folks go down this entrepreneurial road, there's always a fair bit of imposter syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've found is that, first of all, if somebody is open to hiring or contracting with you, like there's a reason for that. But also, you never know what's going on in that business. So I'm actually with my sister right now on a bit of a family trip, and she works for a 1,000-person company where the head of HR 6 months ago was an office manager, and they're in desperate need, and they have no background in human resources. And even though it's this 1,000-person private equity backed company growing really fast, blah, 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 a lot of the folks on the phone right now could step in and be a phenomenal add to that business. And so don't undersell yourself, because you can bring a lot to the table.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get everybody's.
Can I just add to what Alice said before, also just quickly, is like specialization can also come in the form of potential project assignments. Like if you have a strength in M&A integration from working at a number of other companies, there might be a CHRO that's working in a company that doesn't have that and doesn't have the capacity to take that on. So that is another opportunity for people to kind of feed into an organization. It can be, so I always say it doesn't need to be one or the other. Sometimes it can be both, depending on the situation.
Yeah. Or industry, specialize in industry.
Yeah.
Like I work in distribution and manufacturing and deskless workers, which isn't, you don't naturally see fractional chief people officers, right, in that space. Or align yourself with a PE firm or with Karen Brigger, who's a friend of mine, which is good to see. Like mentioned, if you're a payroll person, you're whatever, and you want to do fractional, align yourself with a CPO who might know your services or need your services. I know a lot of people like that who have people that they work with that do other things, but you don't have to be a fractional chief people officer.
Yeah. And the fun part about being out on your own as an HRpreneur, as we call it, is you can make money in all kinds of different ways too. So like this is focused on fractional HR, but you can be an advisor. I have a client portfolio. I'm an advisor. I'm a consultant. I'm a fractional HR. And so, define it because it's helpful, but also you can focus in on what am I really good at and how can I create value for clients? And then whatever format that looks like is fine. You can do project work, you can do, so it's all these different, you're an entrepreneur. And so it's how do you find different ways and streams of revenue and what does the client need in that moment? And I just have a note, sorry, for everyone in the chat, make sure when you respond that it's to everyone, because a lot of people are responding just to host and panelists. So I just want to make sure, I just wanted to say that because there's great comments happening. I want to make sure everyone sees it.
That's a good catch, 100%. I'm curious if we could expound a little bit on this whole advisor potential revenue stream. I know we were planning on talking about it a bit later in the conversation, but super relevant as folks think about how do we build a business and diversify revenue.
I'll jump in because this is primarily what I do, and I know that that there's a couple different ways. There's advising. I advise HR tech and AI companies, so that's advising for equity. But I also work as an advisor on retainer basis. So I know a lot of people asked about how do you price yourself. So I went out of the gate and I fought one client on this. I do not want to charge hourly just because I hate accounting. And also I think it's better for my clients. And I think my value speaks to a retainer basis based on my years of experience, et cetera. So I only charge monthly. I only work with clients at 3 months or more unless I'm doing a very large project. So I realized I stepped out of my job and got a fractional role before I left. And I realized pretty quickly that it felt very much the same. And not that I was running away so much, but it felt like what I was doing day to day. And then I realized pretty quickly I didn't want to do that in exactly that way. So I took a step back and decided what I wanted to do and what would work for my industry. So that, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Ikagi, how do you say that right? What you're good at, what the world
Ikigai.
needs.
Yeah,
Ikigai.
yeah.
Okay.
Ikigai, which is why I remember it, because Deb
Yeah,
watched
Ikigai.
FPP through it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So and Deb can share if I get this wrong. So what the world needs, what you're good at, what you love, and what people will pay you to do, right? So I think about that a lot. And what my industry needed was more advisory. So I charge a flat rate per month. I like to work with people in that for a year or more. And I work with either CEOs or senior leaders, or more likely their HR teams, to bring them more from more traditional HR to a more modern approach and rooted in technology and rooted in transformation and rooted in strategy. So that's what I do for advising, which I think is a little bit different than both Ellis and Alex.
Yeah, I do. So I advise currently for startups all in the HR tech space. I used to say that I thought that was by happenstance, but it's actually really intentional. Those are really more equity referral plays, but similar to where Tracy already is at, where I'm trying to take my work from fractional is to be more on the paid advisory side as well. And that's just personally because with some of the fractional work that I do, particularly with early stage startups, you're not just providing strategy and advice, you're also doing a lot of blocking and tackling. And I personally don't love the blocking and tackling. That's something I've done in my career. It's something that needs to be done. But frankly, the things that I was good at 10 to 15 years ago, I'm not necessarily good at today. And my skill set has changed. And so that's kind of more of a direction that I'm going in. And I think Tracy makes a good point. I know for both her and I can't speak for Ellis, that we have diversified our business to provide different offerings outside of fractional. And the reason I shared that is, as an HR leader, you got to remember you have way more skills than you really realize. We're natural salespeople. We know how to brand ourselves. We understand the business. So you don't have to necessarily limit yourself as you go out there either.
Mm-hmm.
No, that's important. I do brand partnerships. I do speaking, which is a huge part of my revenue. I'm teaching at a University of Innovative Distribution. I'm doing a lot of different things. And I realized that pretty early on too, that, the more different things that I do, if one fails or two fails, or, I don't have clients in a certain area, you still have something to fall back on.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to get into in a second how you all think about charging, especially, equity, cash, all that stuff for advising versus straight up fractional work. Before we do, CJ asked a question about how do you know, or technologies to use for clients. And I'd love to just pause to talk a little bit about this free offering that we have here at SSR, where anybody, whether you're working in-house or you're working fractionally, can talk one-on-one with an HR tech expert and get bespoke recommendations for what sort of HRIS, HCM, AI sourcing tool, et cetera, that you should be using. And the way it works is basically, in the past, you had to jump on all these vendor calls and you got all these irrelevant product recommendations, et cetera. And now we can save you lots of time and money, and it's all free as well. And so I'm going to put a link in the chat right now if you want to book a time with our advisor they would love to chat with you. And I think there's even a giveaway that we're doing where anybody on this webinar can get a $60 gift card if you sign up for a call by the end of the webinar. And so again, I just put that into the chat. Let me just do that real quick again.
Yeah, it already got put it back in.
Doesn't get lost.
Yeah.
Doesn't get lost too much. So feel free to jump on that. And obviously, there's softwares that are good for big companies and there's softwares that are good for smaller companies. The other thing that I will put in the chat here as well is we actually have an offering from Transform. If anybody is interested in going to Transform, we talked about it briefly at the beginning. You can get $200 off. That's for anybody on the chat right now. And then we have a free Transform ticket that we want to give to somebody who's going to go and really enjoy it. And so this will be in a follow-up email, but if you basically post about why you want to go to Transform on LinkedIn and tag these hashtags, which I'll also put in the chat, we will find you and we will give you that Transform ticket. So those are some interesting things that hopefully are useful for folks. And with that, I'd love to dive back in and learn more about how everybody is pricing. So how do you think about the equity aspect of things, the cash aspect, whether it's retainer or hourly? How do we get started?
Yeah, I want to just say something. Oh, sorry. I want to say something about the advisor service first. So tell a real quick story. Phil and I met in, I think, 2017. And then I was doing research, I think in 2019, early 2019, for a big presentation on like, how the heck it was on HR technology. How the heck do I tell people how they can find HR technology? And I found Select Software Reviews, and I've consistently used it, recommended it. And, this is something that I think everybody not only needs to know about, but should do, because it's so hard. Like if you Google ATS, you'll get 10 million responses, right? And so it's just such a wonderful, wonderful resource. And I hope everybody on this call does, it has that quick 15-minute call.
Thanks. I appreciate it. I'll put it back. I love the active chat, but I also don't want it to get lost. I'll put it one more time in the chat.
And you didn't tell me to say that either. I just really love this. As you know, I do. I'm a fan. So
it's true. Yeah, we really appreciate it. We appreciate everybody as well on the call. It's cool that we started these webinars just a few months ago, and it's awesome to see hundreds of people on here sharing their insights and asking amazing questions. Let's get into it. Yeah, how do we think about charging? What's the money aspect of all this?
Yeah, I will get into that because I know it's a hot topic. I also just want to say out loud, because I saw all the imposter syndrome messages that this goes for, I'm going to say everyone, but especially entrepreneurs and solopreneurs and pretty much hundreds of the people I've talked to in the last year and a half alone. Everyone is making it up as we go and just doing the best possible in the moment. So there's no one who so in terms of imposter syndrome, it's we're all just building businesses and making it up as we go. And it's an experimentation of, the portfolio that Tracy has today is not the portfolio she had when she first started out. Right. Or the experimentation and the learning. And I've had many clients that weren't actually the right fit for me, but it was amazing learning. So that's just a call to action of if you love learning, it's the right career. If you are not so into learning or feeling uncomfortable or chasing challenges, you might just want to think about that, because learning literally every day is my motto. Because I don't know what I like until I do it. And I don't know what I don't like until I do it too. So there's it's a roller coaster for sure. I just had to make sure that was in there. And then for pricing, we talk a lot about pricing in FPP. I called out Lindsay Dagianchis, who's on the call too, who has kind of a method to the madness in a spreadsheet format as a tool that we use. But pricing is for a typical fractional HR leader role. You want to, the best practice is to get set up on a retainer. So that means you sign up for an average amount of hours per or a specific amount of hours per month usually, so, or week, so 20 hours a week, or 80 hours a month. And then you have a set retainer, or set fee that you're paid each month or twice a month, however you set it up with your client. And many people also have baked in, you know, if you go have overages or anything like that, then that's accounted for as well. But more often than not, it's not an hourly overage. It's just like you need to manage that time with the client. You've committed to being 20 hours a week. That's how much you are available. They're paying for your availability. They're also paying for your focus time. And if we also talk a lot about how scope creep is very real. And 20 hours a week can quickly become 40 because you're used to it and you're an A player who wants to, you know, do everything you can for that startup or that company or whoever it is. And so managing that scope creep and being intentional and honest with your client to make sure that you're not resenting it, and staying in. So it's difficult to do. It's not easy to do. I know some people who have 3 or 4 clients and they're absolutely way past capacity and they're hustling, and that's their choice. And we love it. And if you only want to work 25 hours a week, then, you know, continuing to work up your rates or your clients and finding the right combination for it. I think there's and I will stop talking, sorry, but I think that there is a glow across fractional HR. I don't know what other word to use other than glow, stereotype, dream of like you work less and you make more. And that certainly is possible. But I wouldn't say it's the norm. And so you're still, you know, you need to design what's right for your life. I've talked to many people who want to work less. They want to, you know, be home with their kids twice a week. And so they don't work 2 days of the week, and they're able to design their life because it is more flexible and you get to choose to say yes or no to clients, or, you know, you seek the clients. And I know a lot of people who work way more than they've ever worked in their life and they're loving it. And that's the flexibility they want. But, you know, like me, I work at night. That's my focus time after the kids are in bed, but I'm home when my kids get home. And so that is the right flexibility for me. And the pricing has a lot to do with industry, your level of experience too. Like, don't expect to come out as a fractional HR manager and make $250 an hour if you're functioning at a different level. Yeah, industry, your experience, and what you're bringing to that value.
Are there any, sorry to interrupt, are there any like good rules of thumb? Like maybe it's your kind of effective hourly rate as a salaried employee times 1.5 or something like that, or?
Yeah, and of course, Lindsay can't talk on here because she has my equation in her head. But Tracy and Alex, I don't know if you have a go-to, but usually I back out from like how much you want to make and then you go down.
Yeah, look, Tracy, you go.
Yeah, so I don't do hourly, but what I used to tell people was how did I do this? Take your annual amount and divide that by 10, and that would be a starting hourly rate. But that's what I used to tell people. Now it's a multiplier usually of 1.5 or even 2. But it's so unique. And my offering is, you know, X amount of money. I have 4 meetings a week because I was driven by, I don't want to have meetings. I want to work less and make more. And the advisory offering allows me to do that. But yeah, I think you can read all kinds of different things, but I know FPP has a lot of advice there in Slack. There's a lot of people sharing that.
And
Deb put it down. Yeah.
After this call, for everybody on the phone, I know a few folks have asked about recording. We'll send a recording, we'll send takeaways, and we'll also link to resources like FPP for folks out there who want to get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, I think just an important part about going out on your own is you do turn into 1099. So taxes are a very real thing. Like you're not having taxes come out of every, you know, check. And so you want to add at least 20 to 30% for taxes. So, you know, whatever you want to make on an annual plus some in terms of what you actually have to take home into the bank. Taxes are fun.
Taxes. What about from an equity perspective when, and maybe this is too personal, but any guidelines on, hey, I'm working with a company, they're giving me X amount of shares or X% of the company, et cetera?
I think Alex, I think you're doing that too, Alice. Alex and I both do that with
Yeah.
advising companies, and it's usually a relatively small amount, but it's also a very small amount of work. It's usually quarterly meetings, sometimes monthly, depending, but it's basically just advice. And I don't think about that. Like, that's not part of my compensation. I think about, like, if that company goes public, does really well, then I get something down the road. But I take those on because I'm really passionate about either the founder or what the product is that they're offering, or both,
Yeah.
ideally.
I would say, yeah, I describe it as funny money right now because it doesn't really mean anything until a
Right.
company goes public or is acquired. So it's, advisory shares that could become lucrative later. But why I do it is because I've always been interested in having a seat in the go-to-market strategy, product development, things that you don't necessarily always get a chance to do when you're in-house in an HR role. So that's the reason I do it. But I've limited myself to 4 because, to Tracy's point, it's not a lot of time. But when they do want your time, they'll want your time. So you just got to be careful and manage. It sounds fun and sexy, but you got to manage your time carefully, because at the end of the day, it is just advisory shares and referral. If you end up referring out their business, obviously that becomes lucrative.
Right.
It could become lucrative too.
Yeah, I have the same for my board of advisors positions with equity. And then there are many people who also within their fractional chief people officer or cross-functional, I have networks, just the cross-functional CTO, CFO, CMO, where when they get into a company, they also have equity along with their retainer. And so that also is a combination of compensation.
Amazing. I know this has sort of been happening a little bit organically. I appreciate everybody who heeded my whatever restriction and didn't post their LinkedIn URLs, but this is now the opportune time, if you want to network, to copy paste your LinkedIn URL into the chat. And this is basically an open invitation. I'll post mine right now. For you want to connect with other folks who are fractionally curious and you want to network with them and see what they're doing. Maybe there are ways of collaborating. There's somebody doing people analytics and you're doing TA and you can refer them business, or you can just sort of commiserate and talk about how hard it is to do this stuff and maybe share the wins too. And of course, obviously, fractional people seems like an amazing place to do that as well. And what's sort of interesting is, as we talked about in our prep call, and we talked about maybe just before this too, like, we could talk about this stuff for several hours. I think we're getting so many good questions in the chat, and I really, really appreciate that. I appreciate everybody who's sharing their LinkedIn URLs and is open to connecting and helping out everybody else on the call. And what's great is, like, I'm recognizing some of these names, right? Like, we have a diversity of people who are like established, and then probably a lot of folks who are starting out as well. So thank you so much. And you know what? I wouldn't be shocked if we did sort of a 102 version of this, maybe kind of focusing on scaling your business in the future, because there are so many good things here. I'm going to also open up another poll to just talk about how do folks network within the HR sphere, so that maybe we can better facilitate this in the future. And then the last thing I'm going to do is, we do have a referral program at SSR for our advisor offering. And so if you have clients who are looking for help on how to pick the right HRIS, HCM, ATS, et cetera, we're going to do a webinar about it in a week or so. And so I'm going to post the RSVP link here in the chat. You can RSVP for that. And I'm just going to go through kind of our advisor program in general, and how, if you're working across multiple companies, you can get paid for recommending us to your clients and helping them out. Because again, we have 4.9 star rating, kind of help out with this thing that nobody wants to do, which is to find and buy the right HR technology. So yeah.
Hey, Phil, I want to just jump in as you
Yeah.
have that up. And first of all, I've done this and I've gotten a payout for this. So it's really, really cool. And it's a really cool service. At the beginning, I mentioned like the one piece of advice is connecting with other people, because I think we don't do this alone and that really helps. What I didn't mention, and I always do mention and I forgot, was that I also hired a coach. And there are a lot of coaches that are either also doing fractional work, or there's a ton a part of fractional people. And there's a lot of great ones out there, but I wanted to give a shout out to Sam Eaton, who I know joined today, who's a wonderful foundational business coach and does all kinds of things. But she also shares a ton on LinkedIn about, and has a lot of meetups. She's going to be at Transform, and she always consistently shows up for all three of us. And I wanted to give her a shout out because she is a wonderful, wonderful coach.
Yes, here.
Here.
Yeah, I've seen Sam a lot on the internets. We have 15 minutes left. We have so many amazing questions to get to. I want to get to as many as humanly possible. And I think one of the first things, which was actually one of the topics we wanted to cover earlier in the session, but we just had so many interesting things to talk about, I sort of missed it. How do you initially go into a client and set yourself up for success? How do you sort of analyze what's going on, how to add value, and then how do you continue over the course of that engagement to sort of prove your effectiveness?
I have a good friend named Barbie Winterbottom, who's a fractional HR executive. And just to the spirit of we're all in this together, right? And everybody shares everything. She shared her framework with me. I took that and adapted that for my industry. So I created a 12 pillars of HR, and I used that as a foundational assessment to assess, and I created questions on that. I used AI a lot. I used that to assess where companies are. And then I created on my own an 8-pillar of a more modern approach. And that's really where they need to be. So I use that as a tool. I share that with the client. I share the results through my audit. And that's been a really great thing, not just for my fractional clients that I've had, but advisory clients as well.
Yeah, I'll echo Tracy from the perspective of that kind of quick audit in the beginning. My go-to is Aladdin has a tool, ALOTTEN, that is kind of what I assume is Tracy's, but it's like in a technology. So it's a tool that I use. It's a software, and it is an assessment that goes through, and then it shows you where they're lacking or where they need something, and what resources might be needed, and ROI of hiring those resources. So it's a great HR tool where ROI is very hard to find for HR. So that's my go-to of like, get in there, quickly assess. And I say quickly with that emphasis intentionally, because the other expectation, like when I'm coaching founders or leaders on what fractional is and how to set it up successfully, is we are not expected to take 6 months to do a roadshow like you would if you're a full-time CPO coming into an organization. They aren't paying for that, and they don't have the time for it. And so we are tasked with doing things in a more effective, efficient way. And so as soon as you can get in there and assess, and then start to coach them on what's needed or prescribe what's needed. But with the title of expert and the title of the price that we're at or how we're coming into the organization, there is that expectation of it's not the same onboarding, like 3, 6, 9 month onboarding, like if you're full-time. So be prepared to deliver faster.
I would also just add, like, aside from everything, a +1 to everything that's been said, is just documenting where the organization is when you first join. So you kind of have, depending on how long the engagement is, a before and after in terms of that. And also, I tend to also look at business critical KPIs that might be important to a business, whether that's retention, productivity, leadership development, whatever the specialization or the specific thing is. And then, like you would obviously, and even if you were in-house, link those HR initiatives back to bottom line results. So that's what I tend to focus on when I go in, and that way you have a before and after picture for that timeline too.
Before I forget, I want to launch a poll to get feedback on this session. please take 2 seconds to fill it out. It really helps us to further refine, next topics and how to make these even more impactful in the future. And we'll send an email with this out in the future or right after the session as well with the takeaways and all that stuff. But we also have sessions coming up on ethical AI use and DEI and kind of how to deal with Trump's new executive orders and whatnot. Just a lot of important, impactful topics that I think are top of mind for a lot of folks. I'm kind of curious, as people fill this out, have any of y'all used one of these online talent marketplaces like Upwork or Catalent or other places to get sort of jobs in the white collar gig economy to prospect and find customers?
I haven't, but I'm working on building something. So that I'll talk more about later. But I haven't, but I know a lot of people who have and who have a lot of success with that.
Okay.
Yeah, similarly, I have not personally used it, but I've heard people who have. I think there's not really a silver bullet in any of the avenues. And so it's all about, as Tracy and Alex alluded to, also just like diversifying where you're going, making sure as many people as possible know what you're up to. Yeah. Referral partnerships with fractional CFOs, fractional COOs. Tracy's husband, which I did not know that until today, by the way, that your husband does fractional. So power couple, power fractional.
10 years, 10 years in fractional. Yeah.
I love it. Okay. But yeah, so, partnerships with benefits brokers, with, employment lawyers, channel yourself as the in-house HR person. Who are your customers and then reach out and gain relationships with them, because when they're talking to organizations who are missing that head of HR, they'll mention your name. When you're in your clients, you'll mention their name. So it's a very, again, just referral based, network based, new business.
Karen mentioned my husband is great, which he is. And she's also kicked some things to him, which he then kicked to somebody else. And so it's all, we're not in competition. We're all really in this together.
Yes. Core value of FPP is abundance. There's plenty for everyone. And I saw someone note that the market seems saturated. And I have no data to back this up, but I think at the premise of it, there are how many companies in this world and how many HR expertise is needed. And so we are not oversaturated. I think the place where we're finding the catch up is the market is catching up. They're learning, they're being educated. So I know me personally, I spend a lot of time just educating businesses and business owners and the customers on what fractional is and how it's beneficial. So there's certainly an education that's still occurring, but it's a movement that's, I don't think, going away anytime soon.
Yeah.
Are there any key challenges that maybe we haven't touched upon thus far?
I think the challenge of, and somebody gave me this piece of advice, the challenge of working in the business versus working on the business. And one of my mentors who's wonderful, his name's Mike Marks, and he's been in distribution for like 50 years. And he's like, you're going to spend 30% of your time on your business, on doing. Now, over time, you can get a VA, you can outsource part, you can use AI for part. But I went very intentionally I use QuickBooks, I'm going to do my accounting, I'm going to do all of my marketing with Canva, I'm going to do all of this because I wanted to learn how it was to run a business. That stuff takes a lot of time. I love it right now. I won't always love it. And over time I can outsource it. But right now I don't want to divert the revenue. So I think that's something to be really mindful of, because that is real time.
I think another one for me is that not everyone wants strategic HR, even though they say that. So what they really actually sometimes want is basic HR infrastructure, but they think they want strategic HR. And I actually ended up realizing one client wasn't for me because what I was hearing on the front end was not what I was seeing on the back end. And so, and I always say this, you also got to remember that, Ellis talked about how quickly we have to ramp up. The interviews or the conversations you have are very quick to get yourself in the door, but you need to make sure you're asking the right questions of those people, just like you would in an in-house opportunity. So you don't find yourself in something that you later have buyer's remorse about.
Yeah. And the only other thing I'd add is there's a couple like main reasons that I see people going back in-house or just determining it's not for them. Also,
Yeah.
just to say out loud, in-house, fractional, part-time advising, all of it is wonderful. It's like very much just dependent on what is going on with you in that moment and what's the right setup. But the benefits are a real thing. So if you need a certain level of benefits and you're out on your own and it's very costly, that can be a big decision for you on if you go out on your own or go into a company where you have employer benefits. There are a lot of people creating solutions for that. And I believe that will be solved, sooner rather than later. But I've seen people go back in-house because they just needed benefits and it was too expensive, or they weren't getting the care they needed on the plan outside of the network. The income instability is another reason people are not comfortable with it. They aren't comfortable not knowing what their forecast will be for the year. Like nothing is stable right now, as we all know, in the market, and you can lose a full-time job just as much as a client, but the having a salary is just more comfortable, and so people go back for that reason. And then a lot of times it's and this is my plug for community. It can be really lonely, and so people miss being in a company, being part of the brand, having their team, and so seek community like as one of the first things you do, because once you have it, it can really create a powerful kind of wind beneath you because you'll miss it. But it can also be lonely because you're building your own business and you might have multiple clients, but you don't have your one team anymore like you would in-house.
And just on Ellis's point, like I live and breathe that in some ways. A friend of mine, and Tracy knows this, has said to me, I'm kind of living in the hallway or the in-between. Like I could continue running my own business or I could go back in-house for the right opportunity. And the right opportunity going back in-house would be because of community connection and being part of something bigger as well. So goes back to the sort of personal choice of it all. The other two things that popped into my mind that have been challenges, at least that I've come across, is Ellis talked about scope earlier, scope without clear boundaries and the ability to actually talk about those boundaries when I've had to have some tough conversations to say, okay, time out, like I'm doing more than we said. And what we're talking about, like, what are the focus areas really moving forward? And I think some people struggle to have that conversation sometimes. And then the other one is I'm always wary when people think that we can come in and do quick fixes to long-standing problems, okay? It's a long-standing problem for a reason, which means it's going to take some time to make some traction as well.
I wanted to add real quick, and these are all excellent points. And we didn't talk much about this, but I'm planning on doing this forever. I know I could go back in, but I have enough, I'm betting on myself that that's not going to happen, right? I turned 52, my youngest turned 18. If you want to make a long-term go of it, and you don't have to, if you do, make sure you're running to, not running from. This was a really intentional move on my part. During COVID, my mother died, we had lots of people died. Like we looked at our life and went, do we want to do this? Like, do I want to work till I'm 65 or 70 in an office? And I said, no, and started to plan and work backwards. And what would that look like? And to Ellis's point, that plan's changed a lot, but I realized, so I'm a deep introvert. I started working from home primarily during the pandemic. I'm also autistic, so that works really well for me. So being able to design my own schedule and go where my energy is and design my day it is a world of difference. I am so much not only happier, but healthier. So only you, so you have to decide what works for you. And, is this right for you? And if it is, start to plan. Even if it's 5 years down the road, start to plan. What does that look like? And how do you get there?
Is there, and we're sort of running out of time, so this will be the last thing we talk about. Is there a good goal to have in your first year or 18 months? What advice would you have, I guess, around goal setting for somebody who's interested in fractional?
Like revenue goal, Phil, or something else?
Maybe just anything, and I realize that sometimes having a number, you can not hit it and feel, you know, sort of upset about it. Maybe it's, hey, I need to be break even sort of on my lifestyle burn, and I want to do that in year one. Maybe that's unrealistic. I don't know.
My year one goal was to do whatever the hell I wanted to and make almost as much as money as I did in corporate, which I did, and I did. And my year two goal is to exceed that and still do whatever the hell I want to do and work with more cool clients. That's it.
That's a big goal.
Yeah.
It was
And
a good goal. Yeah.
I applaud you
Yeah.
for achieving that goal. That's a huge goal, because
Yeah.
I think that's sort of the nirvana for a lot of folks. Yeah.
Yeah. Mine is very similar to Tracy, which I'm grateful for. And I think like just being open to possibility is the other, it's not a goal, it's a whatever. Like luck is when preparedness meets opportunity. So just be open to exploring and like having fun with it. And yeah, get those clients, learn from each client.
Yeah. Mine was similar. I did not make the same as my last corporate job in the first year, but I didn't go in with that mindset because I felt like I would set myself up for failure immediately by creating a certain expectation in my mind. I also just got comfortable with the fact that the first year was going to be messy. Because you know, going back to Ellis's point about learning, I was learning every day and I knew I was making mistakes and I was trying to course correct them day by day. And now that I'm in my second year, I can say I don't make a lot of those mistakes anymore and I'm trying new things. So that's kind of where I come at it from.
Amazing. Thank you all so much for your insights, your openness, talking about, you know, the financial aspects of things, how you built your business, right? You're effectively educating other folks who are getting into this marketplace. But as Ellis said, I think the mindset of abundance is amazing, and it's a big market. There's millions and millions of opportunities to come in and make a difference. So thank you all. Thank everybody for joining. We'll send a recording. We'll send the SHRM and HRCI stuff. We'll send takeaways. We'll send resources. I'll put one more plug for Advisor in the chat. If you have HR tech questions, click on that link. There's a voucher if you book in the next 3 minutes, a meeting, and we'll catch you on the next one. Thank you, guys.
Thank you all for being
Thanks,
here.
everyone.
Thanks, Phil. Bye.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks for hanging.
Yeah.